Is sound picking up now? Okay, so I've just fixed my microphone. Apparently it wasn't working for the entire first 20 minutes of this stream. Apologies for that. Uh, Basically just a quick recap of everything that's been happening on this. So I mentioned in the last stream that I wasn't going to be drawing Esquier's crown manually. That I actually was going to try and draw it using some sort of reference, and then I found a reference and I edited that reference to kind of fit better onto his face. That technique is called photo bashing, or at least that's what I was first introduced to that technique. That's what it was called. I don't actually like that term very much because I feel like it kind of implies that the image is kind of just stuck on, and that's not at all what I want the thing to look like. So, what I was saying before realizing that my mic just wasn't working, like I was trying to pick up the camera mic, which is nonsense, it doesn't actually exist. But what I was trying to say was that, like, when it comes to using a photo manipulation to create a an image, and like manipulate it onto an image, you do need to go in and make sure that it fits onto the image. So that means like doing color correction, changing up your transforms in some cases, and just kind of manipulating things to fit. So like there's levels of that. I'm currently at the level where I am kind of erasing pieces of it that I don't need. And what you'll see is like that's going to then create like voids that I then need to figure out how to fill. In that case, I can use things like my transformation warp. And obviously this will work better or worse kind of dependently on how it's fitting on your image. Because this is like circular, it fits relatively well to SKA's face, which is also circular, but in other cases you might need to do a lot more editing to just get it to fit appropriately. And frankly, getting in there with your hands and just manually drawing in the pieces that are missing is always going to make a better result than just smooshing stuff together. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, just smooshing things until they fit a bit more succinctly. And currently I'm working on two separate layers, so I'm working on the layer that the crown exists on, as well as the layer where I have drawn SKA's body. And something I mentioned before is like, I can see that there is a bit of a discrepancy between the size of his head danglers, let's call them. I don't know what the hangers, like these look like clothes hangers that are attached to his head that actually hold his scarf onto his head. Like the distance between these versus the distance of the scarf as I've drawn it is quite a bit more. So I will have to manually fix that in order to get this to visually match up to what I have drawn. So I'm going to do that on SKA's body layer. Like I'm literally just drawing more scarf into the body layer. And I have that pattern layer that goes over this, so I will also then need to delete the spaces where that is exposed. Now I also have some layering issues now because the crown is on top of everything. But if you look at any of the references, you can see the crown is actually underneath his scarf. So if I wanted this to be more accurate, I would need to remove the pieces of the crown. That I will do later. That's not really a difficult thing to do. I will just move this down slightly. Yeah. Also, his scarf's a lot longer than this. I think I will need to extend the bottom of it quite a bit. Like, this being able to kind of in real time change the lengths of things that I have drawn in the past and make it look a bit more natural and like fixing it as I go is for me the draw of digital painting versus traditional painting. I like being able to work on things in real time and to not have to worry about something going wrong, and then either having to commit to that thing that's gone wrong or having to have planned it out better from the beginning. And like, that's just a preference. I think some people do enjoy stuff that requires a bit more forethought and a bit more planning before they can start. Also, just a reminder to save. Even if you have autosave on, it's probably a good idea to kind of just automatically remember to save every now and then, because autosave, I think the fastest it can possibly do is every 2 minutes, and that's still like using a lot of CPU power. Like, I've mentioned that I live in a country where previously, like, it's definitely gotten better in the past 2 years, but previously the power situation was pretty dire. So rolling blackouts were a thing, but also the government just shutting off your power kind of randomly was a thing without like any notice. And it was really annoying when that would happen, because it was like there would literally be no notice. They'd just shut off your power, and then when you filed a report to say the power's been shut off, firstly, everyone in the neighborhood had to file a report. It couldn't just be one individual, because one individual is just like, well, we're not going to get to it at any time soon. If it's the entire neighborhood, then it's like, oh, okay, well, we have to get to it rather quickly. But it was also just like when there's no warning and the power gets shut off, which sometimes was just because, like, with power going on and off, like, that's not how power stations work. They're not meant to be constantly turned off and turned on and turned off and turned on. So what kept happening was sometimes the power would go back on after the scheduled blackout, but then it would trip. So then there'd be another blackout. And until the services whose job it was to make sure that all the areas had power were aware of the fact that it had tripped, it would just remain tripped. So people just didn't have power for those times, even though it's like after you'd already gone several hours without power, and then it comes back when it's supposed to, and then it goes out again, and you're like, why does this happen? Anyway, point being, sorry, I went on a tangent about power, but the point that I was trying to make was that, like, even if I had, like, autosave set up for every 2 minutes in those situations, I'd still lose a lot of data, like a lot of data, because I would not have power to my things. Okay, I digress. Back to the crown after having adjusted SKA's scarf. I will have to adjust it more. So, firstly, the underside of his general body cloth. Like, it's not a shirt, it's like a full beanbag man. He's got a full, like, beanbag bodysuit. So, on that layer, you can also, like, select layers if you are in your movement tool. So the very top, the first tool in your toolkit, if you just click on whatever the layer is, then it should move you to that layer automatically. It doesn't always work, especially if, like, you've got just a tiny pixel on a layer that's telling you that the thing is on that layer, and you try and select the tiny pixel, it's not going to work very well. But yeah, I need to add this bit of the drawing back in, whoops, without damaging his face. Because if I look at my reference, that scarf is way lower than where I had it. Like, I had it right up against his chin, and that's not where it goes. It also goes over his crown, so there is a bit of a layering thing that will need to be fixed, that I mentioned before, but my microphone was off, so no one heard it. But yeah, like, I will need to kind of go in and start chopping up those layers to make that work. And yeah, like, pre-planning. Had this been pre-planned with any degree of forethought, come on. Ugh. My eyedropper is deciding to be difficult. There we go. If your eyedropper shortcuts on your tablet aren't working, then just go to Alt on your keyboard. If that isn't working, then just go to the actual eyedropper tool. It does sometimes just decide to stop. So I'm just making that about the same height as his danglies here. Also, in terms of forethought, like, pay attention to these little details, like, where are the danglies? Because if I look at his scarf is going to have a bar that goes through the top of it and connects to these danglies. Hence, I want to make sure that it aligns. And I might not even need to do the yellow line at the top of that. I can just kind of keep it here. Okay? And I mentioned that, like, his crown actually cuts off below his scarf, which you can't see here. So I'm going to manually put that in. I'm going to select the scarf where his danglies are. I'm then just going to go to that crown, and I am manually going to erase the danglies up to that point using the selection. Now, obviously, if I had done this on separate layers, then that wouldn't have been necessary. I would have just been able to delete from the layer, and that would have been a lot less destructive than what I just did. But I didn't plan for that, because I didn't plan to have to fix this in the first place. So I am winging it. Sometimes you just kind of have to take things as they come and figure out how you are going to address them as you go. And that's what's happening here. Ugh. I slept really weird on my neck, and now my head hurts. Cool, so that's the bar. Rather, that's the indicator for the bar. That doesn't look great. I will fix that in time. Yeah, there are times where, you know, sometimes things are such a minute detail that doesn't really matter in anything other than giving the impression of what you're doing. And at those times, you can usually get away with not, like, putting that much effort into the detail of it. That does depend, though. Like, I've had commissioners who are very detail-oriented, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you're paying for a piece of art, you know, and you have details that you want to be able to see, then you should be able to ask for those details. But yeah, I have had commissioners in the past where they were incredibly detail-oriented, and because I can sometimes not be, they were very vocal that I needed to, like, fix that and add extra detail, which is fine. It's always something to consider if you want or do painting in any sort of professional capacity, is the level of detail that is being asked for, because that is also going to change things like the cost of the piece. It's going to change things like the time that you should scope for the piece, and like how much time you are going to have to spend on one thing versus another thing. And that's also part of, you know, what one would call managing client expectations, because freelancing, especially freelancing on anything that's like a project, like a physical thing that someone will receive at the end that you have made with your hands, that is always going to be a space where you need to manage your client's expectations from the beginning. Because if there is sort of an abstract idea that someone wants to have drawn out, then they have an idea, and an idea is not a tangible thing. So you then need to be able to, with your understanding of what the tangible thing will be, match that to their idea. But that also does mean having to say things like, this just isn't going to be possible. I think that sort of management of expectations is a lot more prevalent with crafting. So, like creating physical crafts. For instance, I know quite a lot of crafters from the various conventions that I've done who make like crocheted dolls and crocheted things, and all of them, excuse me, all of them have stories about situations where someone wanted to commission something like a hat or like a doll, and they had a very elaborate idea of what they wanted. But the thing with crochet is that you don't just get infinite shapes with crochet. If you want a like an elaborate shape, you have to make smaller individual shapes and kind of stitch them together. I might be a bit I might not be explaining this very properly, but it's just like, for example, if you were making something that looked like an eggplant, you would need the top of the eggplant, and you would also need the base of the eggplant, and those would be two separate things that would then be stitched together. So, like, if a client comes to you as a crafter and says, I would like a spaceship with like lots and lots of outcroppings and lots of wings and lasers and there's a degree to which you need to vet their expectations by saying like, okay, the outcroppings are all going to be separate pieces that then get stitched together. That's going to add to the time of this piece. If they're saying they want lasers and it's crochet, which is wool, you know, wool does not look very laser-like. Like, lasers are light. So if this person's now saying, I want it to glow like a laser, that's not going to be possible with standard wool. Even with, like, wools that have fancy things like glitter and whatever, it's not going to look like a laser. It's just going to look like a glittery bit, but the representation is going to look like a laser. So, you know, vetting the expectations that, like, this is not going to suddenly be able to glow because that's just not how wool works is very important. And hopefully that got my point about managing client expectations across without being too long-winded. But yeah, with the 2D space as well, there's definitely times where, like, you need to sort of vet expectations. I've definitely had that with, I think, like, glowy effects. Because there's lots of ways to create glowy effects in a 2D space, but I have had individuals, and I don't think that this is their fault necessarily. I think it's a combination of watching things in a moving space, like on YouTube and Instagram, like watching people create things digitally, but like in a video format. And that does change kind of the context of how your brain interprets those things. And sometimes it was just like nonsense. It was just like someone who was taking chances, and because they were taking chances, they were just like looking for any little thing that they could call out as being wrong with the commission because they didn't want to pay for the commission, which is also just a thing to like note with like any sort of business or any sort of like thing involving money, is that you will have people who try and scam you into doing free work. But yeah, I've had more than one client experience in which there was an item in the piece that needed to glow, And, in a 2D space, it's not really glowing. It just has to look as though it's glowing, which, can be achieved in multiple ways. I achieved it with like color dodge and various things, but the client that I was working with was just never happy with the end result of the glow. And then they would send me photos of like realistic situations in which things were glowing. So, like a traffic light in a video where it's like the color is shifting in the video. And then I would send back like a still image from the video, which looked exactly like the traffic light that I'd made, and be like, well, this is what you're getting. As it turns out, that person, really what they wanted was an animation. But an animation is not an illustration. They're two very different things. And it is imperative that, if you are working with people, that they can understand that. I've also had instances where clients are like, I would like something 3D printed, so can you draw this? And I'm like, do you want me to draw this, or do you want a 3D model of this? Because me drawing something that is very rendered is still flat at the end of the day. It's still going to be viewed on a screen. And this might sound like insane and like obviously, but you'd be surprised. Like there's people in this world who don't know the difference because it's not in their scope of knowledge, because they might not work with images. Like I have to explain all the time the difference between illustration and animation, and the fact that they are not the same thing, and they are fundamentally different subject matters of imagery. I also have to explain that, like, you cannot draw something in 2D that's just so good that it's going to look like it's moving. That's, like, there's optical illusions, but, like, even those optical illusions, like, your brain will eventually figure out that it's not moving. So, yeah. Point being, manage client expectations. Make sure that your client does have an active knowledge of what they are asking for. That's not to say they need to be experts, just that they understand, like, what is a drawing and what is an animation. Like, that's a big red flag, I think, for, like, in my experience, it's been a big red flag for, like, people who actually want to scam you out of work, which is, like, it's always been a really weird thing where I'm like, why do... Like, it's like, if you don't even know what this is, why are you asking for it? And, like, the only thing that I can think of is just, like, you get off on it. Like, you get off on wasting people's time. But yeah, like, really red flag if someone approaches you for work, and they seem to not have any understanding of what they're actually asking for. It could just be genuine ignorance, but generally if you are wanting to commission something, you're wanting to spend money on something, that is being created, you will have some sort of understanding of what it is that you yourself want. And if you don't, that's kind of a big red flag that A, the person might not be fun to work with, and B, they might just be a scammer or a bot. I've definitely encountered those as well. Unfortunately, in this modern age, there are a lot of, like, farming scams. I don't know if they're maybe called something different, but there's a lot of, like, draw this thing or make this animation or make this comic book, and then the person on the other end, or the bot on the other end, is trying to get you to do the work for the thing to train an AI, and it's just, but, like, in the weirdest way possible. So, like, because, like, if someone's like, oh, I want, like, a very simple image, they could AI generate that very simple image for themselves. But someone's like, oh, I want you to draw this very simple image, and also just give it to me, but they're also not willing to pay you to do that. There is a possibility that what they are trying to do is train your image in an AI for some reason. Like, yeah, the AI scams have gotten insane. The scams in general have gotten kind of insane. That's also why there are certain platforms that I just no longer use, because they just promote scams. Like, there's like, it's like to the point where you kind of question whether the individuals that you are speaking to in any capacity or that are interacting with your profile in any capacity are anything but bots. If it's just like there's no more humans on this. I kind of feel that way about ArtStation. Like, I had an ArtStation for a very long time. I still have it. And I would mostly just use it as a portfolio. Like, I just use it as like a website without having to make a website for my artworks. And initially, I would essentially get every now and then an email from a scam that was like, do you want to get a job here doing this thing that had nothing to do with what I had posted? And, you know, the never ending NFT, can I buy your artworks to use as NFT? I'm so enamored with your artworks because it's so creative and whatever. And it's like, it was very clear that like they hadn't seen my artworks because like I think more so than other artists, I had a little bit more room with that to be able to be like, okay, you definitely didn't even look at my artworks because like I mostly create fan art. So if someone sends me an email saying like, I love your original pieces, you know, they're so inspiring and whatever, and I'm like, I mean, this is just a picture of One Piece, of all of One Piece. The character One Piece. Like, it's like this is just a picture of Luffy. Like, what, like, yeah, sure, it's inspiring, but also like it's Luffy. Like, it's not really being created to inspire anything past liking One Piece. I mean, if it does, then great. But just, yeah, that's the reality of that situation. So if something is now telling me, oh, okay, get this, can I buy this as an NFT? It's also like, it's not my character. I can't sell an NFT of Luffy because I don't own Luffy. So, like, seeing those constantly for, like, 3 years on ArtStation. And then after that, the more elaborate scams, because those were just like copy paste, like it's the same email with like slightly different wording and like from a different ghost account. Like that turned into the AI bots on ArtStation that were like, okay, we actually are looking at your profile and we are actually sending you messages that do sound somewhat like they're coming from humans. The thing is, like, they're normally advertising, like, super elaborate, like, elaborate to the point where it's like, this doesn't actually make any good business sense. Like, super elaborate job opportunities, you know, like, oh, do you want to join our comic book making syndicate? Like, I got a couple of those this year, where it's sort of like, do you want to join this thing which is about making comic books, and it's very, and like they always also, they're like, oh, and it's very anti-AI, so you can trust us. But then like you go to the page that they're saying that you can contact them on, and all the images of the people that supposedly work there are AI generated, and then if you talk to anyone at any point, they're like, okay, well, we want you to make a comic book, or we want you to make this many pages for a comic book, and we'll pay you an amount of money that's just like, that's not, no one is paying that much to internet comic book artists, come on now. But they're like, we'll be paying you this much for this many pages, if you finish this many pages, and then they give you like an AI generated script that's like really clearly AI generated because it doesn't make any sense. And they're like, hey, so yeah, make a comic book for this script. It's like, those are scams that I'm like, what are you trying to get out of this? Like, I get maybe trying to like farm content to feed an AI for reasons, but like, I imagine that a lot of those scams are more just like time waster scams. It's just like someone at the end of this is getting off on convincing someone else they're doing a job, and they'll get paid at the end of the job, and then being like, nope, there was no payment. Because I'm like, what, the thing that has produced the end of that is just so unusable in any context. Like, if you actually make a comic book for whoever asked for it in that situation and you gave it to them, firstly, the comic book wouldn't make any sense because the script that you were given doesn't make any sense. But it would also be like super weird and like badly done because they were like, oh, you only have a day to do like 25 pages. So it's just like, yeah, I don't know. I guess it is just individuals who are like, this is a power game that I like playing by, messing with people. Anyway, I've gone on several tangents in that sentence, but the point being that I no longer use ArtStation because as long as I have been on that platform, it has literally never given me anything but spam. They also share your information, like, I mean, every site does, but, like, they share your information to email spammers. So, like, every email spam thing that I've gotten in the past 2 years has been, in my belief, is that it has been a direct result of ArtStation things, because it's always like, oh, we know you're an artist. Why? Not because we are actually following any of your art profiles, but because ArtStation gave you the email and was like, this person is an artist. Do you want to buy NFTs? Okay, done with my very, 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 very long rant about NFT scams. Lovely water. By water, I mean coffee. So, I am again kind of making stuff up because I can see in the reference SKA's crown is kind of held on by his, I think it's the clothing, so I think it's like there's a ring around the clothing that he's wearing, but because the pose that I'm doing here doesn't align to the clothing in the same way, because like his head's higher than it would normally be, and that's just like the look that I want. I could make it fit better. Should I make it fit better? I should probably make it fit a little bit better. But because this kind of comes up like that, I instead decided to make the crown kind of more like a separate thing that's on the mask that he's wearing. Well, I don't know if it can be considered a mask given that it is his face. Like, it's his face, but his face is a mask. He has a mask face. I also noticed that, like, it's a very specific bend in, like, his neck. Like, it's really evidently, like, curved. So I'm going to use my pen tool to get a more accurate curve in that line. And I'm just going to use my mixer brush. Whoops. I'm going to use my mixer brush, but turn off sample all layers, because I don't want the pattern layer to be mixed into that. And I'm just going to use that to kind of pull up the same colors that I can see in this. Need to make my brush smaller as I approach the head so that I don't accidentally end up making a mess on the face area. So I like using the mixer brush for stuff like this. Like, this is kind of a method that helps me to be able to, like, build up areas that either I've made mistakes in or that I want to change stuff on. Okay, I need my SKA reference back. The one that goes right in the middle of the screen, because, not that one, this one. Because I can't see what the patterns look like. Also, we'll need to put that Expedition 33 patch onto his headband. You can see his headband's also like, this might just be the reference, like his headband's kind of like folded and a bit dirty. So I don't know if I want to make that come across, because I've just kind of made his headband in my interpretation of it look kind of brown and like one succinct color. There's no like textural bits on it. Yeah, as I've mentioned, the amount of like patterning and teeny tiny details make this a very time-consuming piece. And that's okay. I am far more motivated to consume time on drawing Esquie because I really like Esquie. Even though I still to this day cannot quite tell what's going on with his shoulders. Like, it looks like they're literally just panels that run across here. Like, when it comes to actually modeling characters like this, a lot of the time the details kind of get added in later. So when you're creating a character in a 3D space from the start, like, you might have a sketch or something to initially represent the character and the way the character looks, but the overall, like, amount of detail and stuff, because you can, like, add so many details with, like, flat textures that you can then add, like, a bitmap to turn them into 3D textures. Like, 3D modeling is a really, really intrinsic skill, like, or really intense skill. It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And it's a skill that I've definitely wanted to do. Like, there was a time when I had to, for the job that I was doing, learn some 3D modeling in order to teach a subject, because that's, like, that's just the MO of, like, college, is most of the time whoever is teaching you the subject, they learned what they were teaching you 5 minutes ago. That was pretty much how I learned Toon Boom Harmony, was that I had to teach Toon Boom Harmony. So it was like, cool, yeah, I guess I need to learn how to do this now. And it's pretty decent motivation, not gonna lie. Like, having to be the authority on something for a bunch of people who are going to assume that you know what you're talking about really scares the hell out of you. It forces you into a motivational fight or flight of having to just figure it out. And, like, in the years that I was teaching that software, I definitely did figure it out. There were definitely times where I was also, like, entirely just making stuff up as I went along. But I would say that now I am fairly proficient in that software, and, like, I can pretty easily figure out how to do the things that I want to do using that software. It might be different for other people. Okay, so I just remembered why I made this shoulder pattern on a separate layer from everything else. Also, I see Esquia has, like, more patterns on this piece of his, like, armband, and I'm no, just no. Like, is that this person's interpretation, or is that really what his armbands, are they really that decorative? They're really that decorative. It's not just this person's interpretation. Yeah, no, mine are just gonna be stripes. Not doing that. Definitely not doing that. I say right now, knowing that I'm probably gonna end up doing that at a later stage. Just for the hell of it. Just to make my life hard. Okay, so the reason that I made Esquia's armband a different layer was because I can see that it has a bit of an embossment to it, like, it's kind of raised. So if you look at it here, you can see, like, obviously all his clothes have, like, this texture, like this sack texture, except this, which is more like a satin material. But this looks like it's almost stuck on top of it, and it's got some thickness to it. So rather than trying to draw in that thickness, what I'm gonna use are my bevel tools. So just like with the photo bashing, I'm gonna have to do this very carefully, and then I'm gonna have to kind of make it look better as I go. So if I go down to my layers, which you won't be able to see because my fat head is in the way. Let's just get out of the way. So yeah, if you go down to the layers, there's at the very bottom of your layers a thing that says FX. So if you go to the FX, that means effects. And I want the bevel and emboss. It doesn't matter which one you click on initially, it just needs to bring up the layer styles menu. And you guys won't actually be able to see my layer styles menu again because of how OBS is stupid. But what you will be able to see is that on the actual model itself, there is a bit of a bevel that's been added to that layer because I have preview mode on. So currently I have that set to, let's just quickly zoom in. I've got that set to chisel hard, which like that looks way too intense. So I'm going to change that. So I've got smooth, chisel hard, and chisel soft. I'm going to go to smooth. I think that looks a bit better. And I'm going to change the angle of the light for it. So there's a little box that says angle, and it's like a circle with like a little dot in it, and that allows you to change where the light's coming from. And you can also see like a preview window on the side that shows you where the light's coming from. I'm also going to change the shadow color, because at the moment the shadow color is blue, and other than his face, we don't really have blue shadows, so I'm going to change that to like a dark brown instead. Just going to make the size smaller because it doesn't need to be as intense. Like, the more subtle the better, actually, because you'll be able to more easily blend and incorporate it into what you're doing. Okay, you can also change the method by which it is creating the bevel. So it's basically a bunch of like graphs that represent how the light is being showcased, because what it's doing is just adding a light and a shadow to kind of create the impression of 3D space. So it's creating a bitmap, but it's creating a bitmap that's like a way more simplified bitmap. I actually have no idea how this works. Let me not try and explain how it works when I have no idea how it works. But I just kind of mess around with it until I find something that looks okay. What this will also do is it will show you where your lines aren't actually connected. So like there's a hole here that I couldn't see before, so I'll just fill in that hole. And with my mixer brush, I will also just go through and kind of smooth out these edges, because they're quite raggedy when I look at them with the bevel. It's also going to add a bevel to the top, which we don't want, but we will fix that in a second. For now, I'm just going to try smoothing this out. It's almost 3, so I will be ending the stream at 3. And then I will go back and delete the first 20 minutes of the stream that were silence. It's fine. No one was there, so no one witnessed the problem. Yeah, I'm just making that line a bit more uniform. It's easier to see what's not working in a 3D space than in a 2D, with a 2D form, more than in a space. I apologize, I've not been Englishing at all during this stream because my head hurts so much. So I am just talking a lot more gibberish than normal. Okay, there we go. And here we go. Just cleaning this up so it looks a little bit less like it was drawn by someone who doesn't have motor control. I'd like to think that I have a motor control, but I don't always. Okay. Right, and have a look at that from a distance. If you do zoom out, it will make the lines thicker, like it's a vector thing. So it's not necessarily going to give you a very accurate representation until you zoom in to like 16%, I think is that will show your entire canvas in the scene, and that'll be enough. But if you're happy with it, and I am happy with this, I'm also happy with the color, what you're going to have to do is then right-click on the layer with that pattern and go to rasterize layer style. What that's going to do is it's going to consolidate that to a flat image. And normally when I do that, I don't really like how it looks. Like, it doesn't look at all like it looked when it wasn't yet rasterized. There are ways that you can deal with this. The easiest way that I've found is to take a screenshot essentially of that layer that you want to see. So in order to do that, I need to turn off everything, including the background, because I want it to be a PNG. So I turn that off, I turn that off. I just want that pattern to be a separate layer that is a PNG layer. I think because this is an artboard and artboards do not like PNGs, I will probably need to remove this from the artboard, at least temporarily. Okay. Which also means I'm just going to group all of these together and shove them inside. Yeah, the thing about artboards is getting them to maintain the same shape is a little bit of a nightmare, because you gotta do a thing and then do a thing and then move a thing and then move another thing. Okay, but this is what I want. I want that shoulder pattern. So if I remember correctly, and I might not, the keyboard shortcut to make like a snapshot of whatever is below whatever you've selected, and this is going to be a PNG because technically there's no background here. I know it looks white, but it's only white because it's on an artboard. So it's Control-Shift-Alt-E. Okay, it took the snapshot, but it did take the snapshot with the white, which means that I can't do this in the artboard. So I will ungroup artboards. Okay, it's a little bit bigger, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, so go to the shoulder pattern layer and Control-Shift-Alt-E. Now that's going to create a screenshot of whatever was in there. So that also includes the reference that I had there. Right. And that screenshot is going to be more accurate because it's literally just taking a photo of what was there before. So I will just select everything I don't want to be in that photo and put it back. Okay, I'm going to call this shoulder pattern 2 or whatever. And now this is the weird part. I'm going to Control-C to copy this layer. There's a reason for it, I swear. I'm then going to go back to before I ungrouped the artboards. So back before everything that happened. In fact, I'm going to go back to before like I turned off all my layers because I don't want to have to turn them all back on manually. So I'm going to go back to wherever this was. And I'm going to hit Control-V. So now that shoulder pattern 2 is here. And it looks the way it did when I copied it. Now that is a very, very roundabout way of preserving things in real time that you don't want to lose. I would not recommend it in most situations, but for me in this situation it works. Like, if you haven't noticed, I do tend to do things in a bit of a roundabout way at times because, I can do whatever I want. Okay, so back to the crown, and getting the crown to kind of fit. What I might also do, because I'm like, as I'm doing one thing, I'm like looking at another thing. But as I am just working on integrating that crown into the image more succinctly, what I am also noticing is that I should add some shadows to the lines themselves, because even though they have the bevel's only going to appear on the outer edge of whatever the thing is that is going on. So what you actually want to do is you want to just kind of add more shadow detailing into the pattern itself. And like, you can do this before the bevel. I don't really care to in this case because I don't think it's going to affect the way the bevel looks, at least not in any way that's substantial. So I'm just going to add like a little bit of a shade to the edge. It will also help it just blend in a bit better with SKA. Just make sure you're doing this with a soft brush and you're being very gentle about it, because this can easily end up looking way too hard and or way too shiny. Because like right now you can see, because there's so much contrast, it looks very, very shiny. And it's not actually a very shiny piece. Like it works, but you know, I do want to make it less shiny than that. That would be my preference. I'm also noticing that in some of these references, he's got like red that kind of comes underneath this pattern. So you can see like here, like that red that kind of comes underneath it. And then in some, it's just the pattern. So I don't know, I might just add that red underneath the pattern because I like how that looks. Like, I think the game accurate is that there is some red underneath this pattern. What it'll also definitely do is it'll make it look a little less like stuck on there. I'm gonna turn on multiply so that I don't have to worry about finding a shadow that matches that red. I'm just going to use multiply to get a shadow that matches that red. Multiply, if you're not aware, it tries to go from whatever the color you have selected is to black, so it will create like shadows or burns over whatever you've just drawn in the color that you've just drawn it in. It can be very useful and very helpful in those cases. Okay, so that doesn't look right. Like, I'm realizing that it's actually more of a purple than a red. Like, I've chosen to interpret that as red, but it's actually more purple. So I'm going to go back, turn off multiply. I'm just going to put that back like that, so it's just a little bit more purple. I am also going to delete this layer because we no longer need it. I'm going to go to shoulder pattern, which I will rename to shoulder pattern, just shoulder pattern. And again, using my warp transform, I'm just going to push this a bit more up because I feel like it's sitting in a kind of a weird way and I just want it to conform a bit better. So like that. I mean, at the end of the day, I probably will still need to, like this, for example, this little bit here that I've done that curl to doesn't really make sense in the context of what I'm doing. So what I will do is I will fix that using my liquify tool under my filters. So I can just like push it so it sits a bit better. The reason I'm doing this instead of just erasing it is because since the bevel has already been applied to it, I don't want to move it around. Oh yes, also, what you need to remember is that the liquify tool will not work if you have pixels locked. So if you've got pixels locked there, so I have to undo that, and then I have to reapply the liquify that I just did. Otherwise, nothing's going to move. It's just going to change color because the areas that it replaces, it does so by like masking them off. But if your pixels are locked, it doesn't do that properly. I don't really know why it doesn't, but it doesn't. Okay, so that looks okay. I might, let's just see if this will work. No, I don't think this is going to work. I was going to see if I could add a bit of a drop shadow to it as well. Just, well, maybe. Maybe this works a bit better than what I thought it would. But I just need to lower the opacity. I don't want it to look so intense. And then rasterize that layer. Okay. I'm definitely enjoying the kind of like color scheme that I'm getting from this. Like it's certainly very very peachy. I am noticing that I completely missed this area. I'm guessing it was just off my screen when I drew it initially. So yeah, I am gonna have to go back and fix it. That is the thing, right? With whatever tools you're using to speed up your process, is they're not foolproof. In some cases, you will still need to go and adjust and edit and make sure that it looks the way that you intended. Like, it's fine if you don't have any sort of intention behind what you're doing, then, you know, you can just put the thing out, but then it's really gonna read as sloppy if you do that. And I'm just gonna color that in because it looks like it does kind of form a full patch at his head. I'm also like looking at the close-up of his face, and I don't see this pattern on that, and I don't know if that's just because of the angle or because in certain cutscenes it's just not that obvious. I'm also just making up shadows right now. Like, if I think about it, the shadows on his face go the opposite direction, so yeah, I'm making up shadows. Those shadows don't really exist. Because the light goes this way. I need to actually try and remember that so that I don't make stuff up. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to lower the opacity of all of this so that it's less, like, in my face. I think that helps a lot. Okay, I'll return to that. That doesn't look the way I want it to, but I will return to that. But for now, I do have other work to do today. So, let's just take a quick look at current progress. Yeah, I think a decent amount got done in this short time period. Next time I'm gonna just make his hands, because you'll see he's got an arm that's not attached to anything, because I didn't draw his hand, because I was trying to figure out what was going on down here first. And his other hand with Sherma in it. And then adding like more patterns and more textures to his outer form to just make him look a little bit more uniform, because at the moment his face is very detailed but his body is not, so I want to kind of bring those together a little bit better. There's also some more patterns and stuff that I'll probably have to do, but like I'll worry about that when I get there. Right, thanks for everyone who showed up to this stream. Hope that it was